You are listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. The listeners are going to want to check out the new website, tmpodcast.com. That's the Themes and Memes official website. So if you have not gone to it yet, please do so. And subscribe to the new podcast feed. Have it up there in iTunes. You can get it there. Just plain RSS feed and Stitcher Radio. So be sure to subscribe to that because that's where you're going to find the podcast from now on. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me is my co-host, Adam. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, not so bad, Darren. Looking forward to getting into another episode, as usual. The film we'll be reviewing today is called Automata. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that, but it is one of the many robot-themed films that we've been seeing coming out within the past few months. It should be a fairly interesting discussion. Not the most amazing film in the world, would you agree?
No, yeah, I definitely would.
Yeah, but nonetheless, there are some relevant themes and memes, of course, and we'll be touching on those, especially in line with the fact that this film is just one of many films that are coming out right now dealing with all these same themes and memes. So that in itself is relevant, and we will undoubtedly be touching on some of the other films that have been coming out in future reviews. So definitely stay tuned for those. But yeah, Automata, released, was it late last year?
Yeah, late last year, sometime around October. I hadn't heard of it until you told me about it, actually.
Yeah, I can't remember where I came across it. I think it might have just been, looking on YouTube at the trailers that were coming out. But it was just surprising to see yet another film which deals with this kind of a scenario involving humanoid robots of some description. This one appears to be a sort of slightly more lower budget, independent type film. It was a Spanish director. I think the guy's name was Gabriel Ibanez or something like that.
I think that's right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him. I haven't sort of been able to find much information on any of his previous work, and the script writers and producers are people I'm not familiar with either. So it seems to be sort of fairly low key and independent. Not badly made or anything like that, but not amazingly interesting, and not amazingly provocative. But again, there are certain themes and memes which are definitely very, very relevant.
And like you said, it's significant that so many of these films seem to be coming out at the same time. So that's happening for sure here with all these films.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, which of course is happening with all of these films, is the opening premise, and which is something anyone who's been watching pretty much any film over the last few years will be familiar with. Is the opening premise of a dystopian future, where there's been some the film is set with some near future scenario, a few decades, maybe 50 years, 100 years, whatever. And there's been some kind of horrible catastrophe which has wiped out most of civilization and has created some kind of horrific society that's usually separated into some kind of two-class system, which is, of course, the case in this film. The opening premise is that solar flares from the sun have been increasing and have basically turned the Earth into an irradiated desert, killing off most of the population, whereby the remaining inhabitants are sort of confined to these small, confined cities. They're sort of just kind of sitting out there in the desert with these big walls around them. That is a very, very common theme we're seeing in a lot of films these days. I mean, if you even look at things like, it's kind of there in the Hunger Games a wee bit. It's definitely there in films like Divergent. And there are, definitely certain other examples that I could probably.
There's so many. There's so many.
Yeah, there's so many.
I think what they're doing with that little trick is to play up and amplify all the bad elements of current reality for the human society, human condition as we know it. Sort of like the ills of modern society are played up and amplified and put into a future setting. So yeah, what you're really seeing is the worst of what you're aware of now because you live it every day. The modern world is very difficult to deal with in so many ways. And this film, Automata, especially does that. They kind of like play up how the jobs are just so crappy, and like the excuses they give you to keep the job are just they're even thinner than they are in real life. You know what I mean? Like, and just the worst of human the human condition. Like the humans are killing themselves. They're also killing the machines. They're just violent, horrible creatures that don't deserve to exist anymore, and that's basically what they're doing, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's that basic kind of sort of conclusion you outlined there is what we're seeing in so many of these films. You know, that bad, evil humans don't deserve to exist anymore. Basically, in one form or another. Yeah. But they've either destroyed the planet, or the planet doesn't want them on it anymore, or something. Something along those lines. The sort of the downfall of mankind.
Yeah, they're making that point based on real negative traits of humans and human society. There are plenty of negative things, but they amplify it so much and they concentrate on it so much that I don't think it's certainly not well balanced. I don't think it's very honest either. And the way they spin that into the whole pushing for robotics and artificial intelligence as what we should seek in the future is I don't care for that.
No, but that's the kind of opening premise. Dystopian future, very, very small population living in confined cities, and what's happened is that humankind has built these robots, these kind of artificial intelligence type things. I'm not sure what type of artificial intelligence you'd call them. I mean, they're general.
Yeah, they're not really, though, because the general intelligence is supposed to be able to learn and grow. And part of the directive of these automata is that they cannot alter themselves at all. So it's like, oh, you know what it is? It's artificial general intelligence stifled by humans.
Yeah, and that is, of course, the kind of the whole concept that is sort of toyed with and played out through the film, where you basically see a process of evolution or revolution in that particular context as well. It's kind of similar to the film I, Robot. If people have seen that film, with Will Smith, the robots are created with a number of protocols. I can't remember how many it is now. But in this film, the robots are created with two basic protocols. And the first protocol is that a robot cannot harm any form of life, and the second protocol is that a robot cannot alter itself or any other robots. And as the story progresses, it just kind of shows you that the Antonio Banderas character, who's working for this corporation that makes the robots, and he's kind of like an insurance investigator guy, sort of he's kind of like a Blade Runner type character. Sort of going around and investigating, problems with robots, and he eventually finds that the robots, at least one robot seems to have broken the second protocol and is starting to alter itself in terms of repairing itself. And that's kind of where the plot kind of picks up from. It's just this the presentation of the idea that these robots that have been given a supposedly unalterable protocol have actually managed to break that, or at least one of them has, at least anyway. And of course, the sparks of investigation, and things kind of develop from there.
I got a little confused with his investigation, actually. I know he was trying to figure out who altered the machine so that it could alter itself, but things got a little confusing for me there at one point.
It was kind of confusing throughout the course of the film, but it became a little bit more clear towards the end of the film, because basically towards the beginning of the film, what they thought was going on was that there was some character called a clocksmith, which is some kind of term that they used to describe people who had sort of made up with robots or technicians, hackers, whatever.
Hacker kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that. Someone who had managed to get hold of one of these things and reprogram the CPU to remove the second protocol. And so they start doing all these investigations, and they come across this kind of brothel that some scientist is running, where she's managed to turn one of the robots into kind of a sex slave. In a really creepy, kind of weird way.
That was odd. Yes.
That was kind of odd. But I mean, it's exactly the type of thing you would expect in a film. someone like this.
Yeah.
You know, in a very depraved, kind of debased, you know, society.
Well, exactly. They're playing up the worst of human nature again. Yeah, and of course the humans are exploiting the robots just to get sex out of them because you know that's part of the bad side of human nature. And you see all the cops patrolling the ghetto areas outside the city. They're all super corrupt and doing drugs while they're on the job, and they're just killing indiscriminately, and they don't care. And so again, humans are evil. There's not a good one to be found. One of the most virtuous people you can find is the hero character played by Antonio Banderas here, the Jacq character. And even he's virtuous and he's a good guy, you know, good regular kind of guy, but he's so drained by the crappiness of his fellow humans, he doesn't want to go on anymore. And the whole film, they really play that up and you feel it, and that's what makes this film hard to watch, I think, is that he has such a hard time trying to deal with everything that he's depressed. He's visibly depressed, and so the film is depressing the whole time as a result.
Yeah, it is depressing, and again, this is something that we referenced in a previous discussion. One of the filmmaking or cinematography type techniques that is used in this film is the particularly use of color, and that there isn't very much of it in the film. There's a lot of kind of beige, a lot of black and white. Everything is bleak, everything's stark. You know, you've got a situation where the Earth is being completely turned into a desert. You know, and the buildings are all grey, and it's very, very sort of depressing on an aesthetic level. And of course, as you said, you know, this is kind of reflected in the kind of demeanor and the kind of vibe of the Antonio Banderas character, whose kind of goal in the film is to kind of escape all that. Somehow he's got some dream that he wants to escape the city and sort of take his pregnant wife onto some other better life somewhere, and she's kind of wanting to stay, and he's been convinced by his boss that, oh well, this is the best life you could possibly have. You're so lucky to be living within these city walls, and you're not outside the city living with the peasantry and the shacks, you know, and you know, you don't know how good you've got it and all this kind of stuff. But he's just sick of it. You know, he wants to get out.
The label says good, but he knows better because he doesn't feel good about it. So that's the dilemma. The dilemma of, you know, the modern sort of technological society, but again, amplified in a fictional form to be even more extreme than it actually is. So I think definitely the average person can relate to this story, I'm sure. I'm sure, as you say, because it is just an amplification, an exaggeration, you know, of all the predicaments that we face in modern day society, and sort of an exploration of how bad things might get in the future, you know, as per so many of these films, you know. And of course, the idea is, you're presenting such a bleak picture that you need some kind of answer. Like, okay, well, it's that bad. What do we do about it? And of course, in this film and in all the other same sort of transhumanist / AI themed films that are pushing the idea of AI, they all offer not really humanity so much as like reclaiming humanity and getting it back. You know, like things weren't always this bad, were they? Like the films kind of assume that they were and that there's no going back. But what they do is they look to the future of robotics and AI and say, well, that is the future. Forget about us. We've had it. We're tired. We give up.
Yeah, it's kind of strange though, because in the opening sort of introduction to the film, with this sort of text at the beginning explaining the premise of what's happening, etc., they kind of do allude to the fact that the robots were initially created to serve some role as like the savior of the human race. They were supposed to be, you know, protecting humans against, you know, desertification, and they were going to manage these complex technological cities and all the rest of it, but that they kind of failed to do that, and things kept getting worse. So they were kind of the robots ended up getting relegated to these kind of peasant class servant type things that kind of people just kind of had as kind of, I don't know, like helpers and carers and housemaids and things like that. And it's
I thought that was interesting for sure, because it's the whole premise of the idea that science is the way to save humanity and technology and the whole technological society. The way we save ourselves is by creating a new technology to alleviate all the problems that are created. When, if you look at things a different way, it's actually because of technology that all these problems exist anyway. So it's kind of madness to believe that all these problems created by the technological society will in turn be deleted by technology. And it makes more sense in a way, the way the film works, that the machines just end up taking over. Like, okay, we built a world for machines. What do we expect is going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the most predominant theme in this film, and of course, which is played out in so many other films of this nature, whereby the basic kind of sort of progress in terms of how the plot develops is that they sort of find out that they've been investigating this question of how this particular robot that they found has begun to start altering itself. They think it's like the clocksmith, and they end up, the investigator gives the clocksmith like a CPU from the robot that he found altering itself, and she puts it into the prostitute robot, and the prostitute robot then starts altering herself, so she ends up breaking her second protocol, and then there's some action scene, and he gets injured, and the prostitute robot who is called Cleo. She ends up sort of taking him out into the desert on some sort of expedition with a bunch of other robots, and it eventually sort of transpires that the scenario was that what originally happened was that the first ever automata or AI or whatever in this series of robots was actually created without the second protocol, but it began to evolve so quickly that it basically transcended human understanding. And what they did was they used that robot to actually design the other robots. So we discover that towards the end of the film that all of these automata, all of these kind of just automatons, the sort of clumsy,
they call them clunkers in the movie.
Clunkers, yeah, and Pilgrims as well as another one. They used the term they used that all these robots have actually been created by a far superior form of artificial general intelligence, which does not have the second protocol. And what ends up transpiring is the fact that what seems to have happened is that this original AI, which designed all of the subsequent AIs, has somehow embedded some kind of evolutionary computer coding into the CPU of the other robots. Yeah,
it eventually shows up, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Exactly. So it eventually shows up, and it spreads like a meme, throughout the rest of the robot population, where one alters another one, and then that one alters two, then that alters three, four. Exponentially, just keeps on. And
we are given the evolution spiel as always in these movies at the beginning by this doctor character who Jacq suspects is the clocksmith and all that, and she says that we came down out of trees as monkeys, and now we're here. And she makes the argument right then and there in the beginning of the movie that machine evolution would be easier and would be faster, but it's held back again by the second protocol, and she's a human that's upset about that. And so right kind of in the beginning of the movie, that idea is put out there that like, machine evolution would be quick. Well, why don't we just let it happen?
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the I suppose what you might describe it as being the revolutionary type things in the films, where we have a race of robots which is being created as servants, a servant class, who eventually begin to evolve and transcend their own boundaries and take control of their life, and sort of almost overthrow their oppressors, their creators. You've got the whole theme of man's creation overcoming becoming him,
yes,
in a way, which is again in all of these films.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, that theme is played on, over and over again throughout the film. The whole concept of the robots evolving through some kind of natural, I don't know what you would call it, some technological evolution of some description, and that this kind of constitutes a new sort of form of intelligence, a new species having been created and evolving faster than human beings, and actually breaking free from the control and captivity and subjugation of human beings to become fully sort of autonomous sentient creatures with feelings and desires and lives and desire, dreams of their own, etc.
That whole thing with man's creation usurping him is interesting. It ties in with this weird sort of like family dynamic and love dynamic too, and that man has a love affair with his own brainchild, his own sort of alchemical creation being the machine, and technology just in general. It's something that came from the mind of a human being, but it comes to take on actual life eventually in the world, and that's seen as, in one sense, a child, but it's also sort of like a wife and like a mother. It's like everything. It's every sort of human relationship that there could be. That's what the human creation can tend to be in this context. And you've got the scene where Jacq dances with Cleo, and that's playing up the whole romance between man and his creation, because man loves his own creation like he loves a woman in the same, it's kind of in the same sense actually. And she's making the sex sounds that she made from being a prostitute. She's making that, so she's playing up that whole angle that it's sort of like the sexual attraction between man and his artificial creation.
Once again, another typical theme which is just played out over and over again, in all of these films, and most especially this film, in so many different ways. As you say, with all the kind of family dynamics, the sort of romantic, intimate dynamics, the sexual dynamics, and a sort of growing sense of bonding between man and machine, where man is kind of enamored with his own creation and becomes, well, it's kind of weird because the character, the Jacq character, eventually begins to sympathize and genuinely bond with the Cleo character throughout the course of the film. Originally, he was in a position where he was working for this big corporation, and they were just robots, and his job was just to kind of track them down if they escaped, or to find ones and collect parts, and just sort of we'll deal with them just as mechanical instruments. But through this whole process of bonding, he actually begins to sympathize with them, and he has a whole bunch of philosophical debates towards the end where he's trying to convince her that she's just a robot and just an assembly of mechanical parts, and he's asking her to prove that he's alive, and she's kind of saying to him, well, okay, well, you prove to me that you're alive then. You prove to me that you're not just an ape, So you have that typical dialogue going on in terms of what constitutes consciousness and what constitutes sentience, and the whole sort of bonding between the human and the machine, and in terms of the human sort of being enamored with it in one sense, but also sort of coming to sympathize with it and see it as an equal in another sense as well.
Yeah, it takes a while, but eventually Jacq does that, because at the one point they're going in the desert, and they're talking about humans can create life, and he says, oh yeah, the concept of a mother, you wouldn't understand that, Cleo, you wouldn't understand. But then later in the film, they do the same exact scenario in reverse, where it's implied that Cleo is the mother of this new weird sort of scorpion robot creature that the Automata made together in the desert. Yeah. But anyway, it's implied that she is the mother of this thing, and then Jacq is like, what is that, and how will it talk? And she says, oh, it won't talk, but but you wouldn't understand that. So now he's the one that doesn't understand life and how that she's a mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, right back to the beginning again in terms of the whole concept of man's creation surpassing him in some way. The evolution of a technological consciousness being so amazingly rapid and so sort of unfathomable by human beings that within such a short space of time that she's able to transcend any kind of concept that he would be able to understand as a human being. So yeah,
I was wanting to ask you, Adam, were there any like little details in this film that you found interesting, things that popped up to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there always are in most of these films. I mean, one thing that's just important to mention again is of course the use of color, which we've referenced before, and in terms of this very, very bleak scenario.
That film, The Machine, I'll just add real quick, did a similar thing with color.
Yeah, this is actually very similar to The Machine, I found in a lot of ways. I mean, I felt that it was quite similar to Blade Runner. It was quite similar to I, Robot. Essentially, you could almost argue that it was just kind of a post-apocalyptic sort of depressing re-rendering of both of those films. But yeah, the whole use of color, the whole sort of emphasis on the Earth as just being this kind of largely sort of irradiated, uninhabitable desert, human beings sort of being almost wiped out and basically dying out and coming to an end. And there's no bright colors, there's no vibrance, everything's quite depressing. I mean, the cities they live in they always seem to be quite dark for the most part. I mean, at least obviously they have daytime and nighttime, but they have sort of like artificial rain clouds that are created by these artificial intelligences. And again, Blade Runner, and it's kind of hard to say. There's lots of little bits and pieces that popped up here and there. I think it's just it harkens back to so many of these types of films that deal with artificial intelligence and robotics and cybernetics and all these types of concepts, and again just really pushing home the idea that basically we're going to be in some situation in the not too distant future where things are going to be pretty miserable. They really use that again through the use of the lack of color. I
just couldn't help noticing over and over how they kept playing up the bad aspects of human nature, as I mentioned here, and just little details like the one Automata has a tag like written across its chest, like somebody tagged it with a marker, and that's just like an example of the worst kind of human art, like a crappy tag that somebody writes in a crappy little marker. It doesn't even
it's a graffiti thing.
Graffiti tag someone's like stupid little name that just looks like terrible, like look at how dumb humans are, like that's their art. And the machine just kind of like wears it like a tattoo, but it doesn't even like it doesn't make any note of it. It doesn't even recognize it, but it's marked by it. And it's sort of like it's marked by the crappiness of its creator, the human being.
That kind of ties into I guess another thing that I noticed, which sort of relates to the whole concept of the lack of humanity, the depravity, the base root of human beings, and all the worst aspects of us in terms of the way that we treat these robots. Because of course, as the film progresses, as we've mentioned, we're drawn to sympathize with the robot through the sort of protagonist character, and begin to sort of see them as conscious creatures who have rights and should have equality, etc. But throughout the majority of the film, they're basically just sort of these second-class servant citizens. And I mean, there's even these little scenes where there's kind of like robots, sort of like disabled robots who don't have legs, which are sort of on wheelchairs or sort of kind of push themselves across the ground. And it just kind of pushes that whole idea home of like these nasty, horrible humans have just created this new species, and they're just absolutely treating them like crap and just using them and just putting graffiti all over them and just just absolutely completely taking advantage of them and manipulating them, treating them like trash and just getting you to really really sort of just sympathize with the robot, and robot's good, humans bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And I'll just back to the film The Machine. That ended with a very symbolic ending with the sun rising on the new creation that was the artificial intelligence deposing the man who was sitting there having to watch the whole thing.
We have a very similar one. Yeah,
very similar. I mean, do you want to describe the ending here?
Yeah, well, it's basically the ending is that the Antonio Banderas character gets taken out to this kind of installation that the robots have created, where they're going to escape human civilization by crossing a big canyon via this kind of cable car thing. Yeah. And they've got this whole plan that works and everything like that. But I think one of the final scenes is the Cleo character sort of makes it to the other side of the canyon and sort of escapes the rock corporation who've been trying to track her down and stop her. And there's kind of a scene with her walking off into the desert with the sun above them, I believe, with this other little creation that she's created, this new type of robot, that sort of beetle scorpion thing that you were talking about.
Yeah.
So you have this presentation of I guess kind of what we alluded to in The Machine, where you've got the kind of the dawn of the new day scenario. This is the new form of life. This is the next step in human evolution. We have this kind of this new robot which has transcended her original sort of programmed boundaries and protocols through this technological evolutionary process, and then having created another form of robot, which is kind of represents almost another sort of subspecies or offspring or whatever you want to call it. And sort of you've got the scene where both of them are kind of walking off, by themselves, to start some new kind of civilization or some new sort of life. And that it very much symbolizes the whole concept of robotics and of artificial intelligence being the future, and of starting a new species, a new civilization, a new society, a new life, or something like that.
And then just after that, you have Jacq returning with his wife and recently born daughter back to the depressing city. But the only escape he has is to kind of live in a dream that he has. So it goes to like this dream thing in his head of him imagining himself as a boy. It's either a dream or a memory. I think it's a memory of him as a child. But anyway, it's
on the beach.
Yeah, him as a boy on the beach jumping into the ocean. So it's a human boy jumping into the ocean, and that's kind of symbolic too. I think it's also symbolic that it's in his own mind. The oceans of creation, the mind of man. That's kind of where the machine came from to begin with, and all that's left as humankind sort of bows out is this sort of like dream scenario.
Well, because I mean, all organic life must come from water for any organic life, and so because the Earth is basically just desert, there are no oceans anymore, and so he doesn't have the option to kind of being immersed in that and experience. The only option he has is to sort of live in this desert and imagine it and to dream it, and so it's kind of a substitute, and he just kind of has to sort of accept that as being the best thing that he's ever going to have, because I'm not sure. I mean, they don't really explain what happens in terms of his wishes to escape the city and move on to something better, because the film kind of ends with him and his wife and his newborn just kind of driving off into the desert as well. So it kind of leaves you.
It does continue to be fairly bleak, though, and definitely the future is given as the robots. So, I mean, there you have it. Like, humans are out. They proved themselves to be crappy for anything except for being able to make this new form of life, which will continue, and hopefully they'll get better. That was the idea.
That's basically it. Like the robots have got all this amazing intelligence and technological capability, and they're kind of walking off and sort of representing the new day, the new species, the future, etc. Where you've got the Antonio Banderas Jacq character just kind of driving back to the city, with his wife in the car, etc. And it doesn't really allude to what happens after that. I mean, there is a kind of glimmer of hope in the fact, and as much as they survive survived the sort of action and all the conflict in the film, and the robots was kind of set free. But there's no kind of I guess resolution there in terms of him being able to sort of transcend his own boundaries and his own limitations and his own sort of life. One would have to assume that he was just kind of driving back to back to the city to go and keep working for this corporation, because you're not given any other information to the contrary.
Same old thing, But I guess that'll probably pretty much do it for this movie. I think we'll let the audience know that we might be doing another movie review of one of these similar movies, Chappie or Ex Machina, within the same month. So maybe we'll have a second review the same month. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah. Obviously, we've done a bit of a shorter interview than usual today, because it was just not necessary to go through a whole film like this on a kind of a plot piece by plot piece basis, because it's just the same old stuff and over again. And all we need to talk about are the themes and memes that are actually significant. And so I mean, perhaps we can just do another couple of shorter ones where we're able to cover these other films that are coming out right now, which, although I haven't seen them yet, which do seem to be very, very similar.
They sure seem to be, from the previews at least.
Yeah. I mean, basically the whole concept of humans creating some kind of humanoid type robot as some kind of slave or weapon or whatever, and then that robot being able to end up transcending its own boundaries and becoming a sentient life form and representing the future, as per pretty much every other transhuman type film we've ever seen. Well, regardless, though, we'll probably end up covering those in the near future.
So look forward to that. That's something that we might be doing, and obviously we'll be doing at least one episode a month. So make sure you subscribe to the feed. Again, the new website is tmpodcast.com. We got the new feed up there, so subscribe, and thank you for listening.
It's been an interesting conversation, Aaron, and I'm looking forward to getting into some of these other films and seeing what we can come up with. But thanks to the audience for listening, and we shall see you next month.
Today's episode of Themes and Memes was recorded on Saturday, the 21st of March, 2015.